right. The next big COVID related law, again, is coming from Cal OSHA. And it is similar to the California supplemental COVID sick leave. However, Cal OSHA says that if an employee is exposed to COVID at work, or if they contract COVID at work, the employer must pay for all their wages and their benefits if they are excluded from the workplace. Now, this is a big deal. You cannot require an employee to use the California sick pay that they get, and you can't require them to use the California COVID supplemental leave that they get. This is a brand new bank of leave that essentially has no limits whatsoever. So conceivably, if an employee is exposed to COVID at work and they need to be excluded from the workplace because they are not vaccinated, you may have to pay that employee up to 5 or 10 or 15 days while they're actually excluded from the workplace. A month from now, they may call you and say, hey, I've tested positive for COVID. I have to stay off work for 10 days. Then you would have to pay them under the California supplemental COVID leave. Then maybe in May or June, you have an outbreak of COVID at work and the employee has to go out again. So this becomes pretty burdensome and expensive. And there is really no end to the Cal OSHA exclusion pay requirement. And not only do you have to pay them their wages, you also have to pay them their benefits. So whatever health insurance and other benefits they're getting, you still need to maintain that. This is why it is so important when an employee notifies you that they have COVID. This is why it is so important to investigate. This COVID exclusion pay only is available if the employee was exposed to COVID at work or caught COVID at work. So when an employee tells you that they're positive for COVID, you have to perform an investigation. And part of that investigation is to determine when they were last in the workplace and when was their onset of symptoms and when was their positive COVID test. So and then you need to identify all their close contacts in their high exposure period. So for example, if an employee calls you on a Saturday and says to you that they tested positive for COVID, you would have to identify when was the last time they were in the workplace. And perhaps that was Friday. So if they were last in the workplace on Friday, you have to identify who their close contacts were on Thursday and Friday. And I think we all know by now what the definition of a close contact is. Those individuals who have been within 6 feet for a cumulative 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. So those employees who have been in close contact, they need to be excluded from work for 5 to 10 days unless they are fully vaccinated. So you see why it's so important to perform the contact tracing, because these employees who need to be excluded from work, they're going to be entitled to the exclusion pay under the Cal OSHA standards. And one of the big burdens to an employer is that it is going to be up to the employer to prove that an employee did not get exposed at work or did not get COVID at work. So the burden is going to be on the employee. And that's why the contact tracing is so important and it needs to be documented. One of the other things is that if an employee calls you and says to you, hey, I tested positive for COVID, and I think I got it from my wife, or I think I got it from from my neighbor, write that down and document it, because that too is going to be evidence that the employee did not catch COVID at work. So that's very important.